So I don't know about you, but growing up, I read a lot of books, hundreds of books, probably because I didn't have many friends and I just didn't really talk to anybody, so I read a lot. And over those hundreds of books that I've read, I found 5 that were really the most impactful in my life, and I wanted to share those with you today in this video. I've gotten this question so many times of which books have really changed the way that you think, the way that you function on an everyday basis. And these are the ones that have had the greatest impact on my life. And keep in mind that this might not be something that is going to have the greatest impact on your life. Everybody has different preferences, different ideas, different goals and visions as far as where they want to be or who they want to be. But I think each one of these 5 you're going to find throughout this video is somewhat different in a book. So some are going to be more so focused on psychology, some are going to be more so focused on relationships or finances or different areas of life that I find to be very important. So stick along. I think you're going to find some value in this, and hopefully you can pick up some of these books. This is not Starbucks. Look, I'm an introvert. I am not good at talking to people, and people don't really think that because they just assume that I make videos, therefore I must be outgoing, I must be extroverted because I like talking. But the truth is, I don't. I'm not very good at communicating with people. And so I picked up this book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And when I first saw it, I kind of thought, the title sounds a little bit strange. It almost sounds like sociopathic, like you're going out with the goal of making friends and influencing people. But there's a reason why it's sold over 15 million copies. It's one of the best-selling books of all times. And it's really for a reason. It's because reading this book has really helped me to communicate with people better, whether you're in an elevator talking to strangers or you're going to a company event or you're talking to family, just better at communicating and making friends overall and just being friendlier with people as a whole. So, looking back on it, I kind of laugh at some of the things in here because I find it to be common sense now. But at the time, I didn't know most of this. So if you haven't read this book yet, I would highly suggest it. And even for extroverted people, I've seen extroverts who talk too much. They talk about themselves too much. They talk about their dreams that they had last night that nobody cares about. When's the last time you cared about somebody else's dream and they go on for like 20 minutes talking about it, right? Nobody cares, right? So just picking this book up, it's going to help you just kind of interact with people better. And there's definitely going to be times where you really want to make sure that you're impressing somebody. Maybe it's your girlfriend's father or the vice versa or something. There's just people that you want to make sure that you're communicating with in a good way. And so I think it's something that really, really does change a lot of people's lives, and it definitely helped me a lot for myself. So couldn't recommend it more. Definitely pick up a copy if you haven't picked it up already. So this next book is something that has likely saved me thousands of dollars since I've read it. And it's a simple book on negotiation. So this one's called Getting to Yes. And I think that if you're not going to read this specific book, I would highly suggest reading something on relations to negotiation. And this doesn't have to be necessarily on how to negotiate for a car or how to get a lower price on buying a house, but it also helps in different areas of life, even for relationships, even for marriage, even for arguments that you might be having. It helps to sort of understand the shoes of somebody else, somebody that you might be disagreeing with, understand their interests and kind of put yourself in their shoes. Now, this provides a lot of different kind of ideas and principles, but one of them is essentially to kind of not think about the general approach that we tend to take when we argue something or try to negotiate, which is to have our stance and not budge from our stance and say, you know what, this is the price that I want, or this is what I believe, and I'm not going to ever budge from it. But instead to kind of understand their interests and find a way to work around that so that you don't have to necessarily give up something that you really care about most, and they don't have to give up something that they care about most either, to really kind of find some middle ground there. So just reading something on negotiating, there's so many other books that are very similar to this that you can find. Just go on to Amazon, type in negotiation books, and there's a ton of other ones that I've read that are all very, very great. But this is one that's really easy to read. I mean, you can read this in a day or two, you can read this in a weekend, and it's really gonna save you a lot of money and a lot of headache next time you get into arguments, next time you want to get a lower price on something. It's just going to be something that's so incredibly practical in your life that you're not going to want to miss out on it. So one book that I found to be really impactful in my life was this right here. It's called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And I think what's really interesting about this book is that it really discussed some things that I just found to be so intriguing, like why people drank the Kool-Aid with Jim Jones, or why people join cults, or how the greatest car salesman in the world, the person who sells the most cars, how he does it, and kind of breaks down the psychology of that. So it's actually really great for business, but also for just everything in life. I actually find myself referencing this book most often in most conversations, just when kind of bringing up topics of why did that person make that decision? Why were there 60 witnesses to a murder and nobody called the police? So there's just really intriguing things in that I found to be just so really interesting with that. So it's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Let's talk about the next book, which is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, this is the only personal finance book in this video. I've read so many books on personal finance and investing, but I would say that this tops the charts. And it's kind of an entry-level book for personal finance, but what it does is it changes the way that you view money and finances. And look, you don't have to be big into finances. You don't have to think about money every day. But if you're gonna read anything related to money, I would highly suggest this. And I think that everybody should read this. I wish it was a requirement in school, but it's obviously not. Essentially, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the very basics of it is that this man, Robert Kiyosaki, he had two essentially sort of mentors or fatherly figures in his life. One was his real father, who made quite a bit of money. I believe he was a principal and maybe a superintendent at a school. So he made likely six figures. He was doing quite well from the outside on paper. But in reality, he was spending all of the money that he was making. He was buying things that he just really shouldn't be buying. And he was poor. He was making a lot of money, but he was poor. Then he had this other fatherly figure who didn't even go to college, who shouldn't have been successful on paper, but was a multimillionaire. And this person realized that, look, if you can invest and you can have your own businesses rather than kind of relying on income from a job, then it's something that can be life-changing. So that's kind of the principles that he teaches in this book, but more so just the mindset of finances and how to automate things and how to have your money work for you rather than you having to slave away at a job necessarily. And so I just think it's so interesting. It's pretty related to real estate. He made a lot of his money through real estate, but it's not necessarily something that you have to do for yourself. I can't recommend this book enough for anybody who hasn't read it. And at the very least, just read a big summary of the book, watch an hour-long video from Robert Kiyosaki about the basics of it, and it's gonna really rewire your brain and you're never gonna think the way that you thought before. So when coming up with this list of books that influenced my life, it was actually pretty difficult. As I said earlier, I've read a lot of books, and so it was difficult to narrow it down to just 5. So before we get into the first one, let's do a couple of quick honorable mentions in case you've already read some of the books here and you're looking for others. So one of them was called Quiet: The Power of Introverts. And I think this is just really great for people who are obviously introverted, but it kind of shows you some different things that you can do if you're an introvert and you're not great at speaking, some of the other strongholds that introverts have that people kind of overlook. Another one is actually a Tony Robbins book. And I'm not a huge fan of Tony Robbins, but I can actually say that I've really used some of the principles that I've learned in this book in my life, especially when it comes to goal setting and achieving those goals and finding ways to achieve those goals. I think the biggest thing I really got out of this was that there's really 2 drivers when it comes to what makes you kind of hit your goals or make decisions, and it's pain and pleasure, right? So there's things where you might have a goal and you do things that are fun once you hit that goal, so you kind of celebrate when you hit the goal, or there's pain-oriented goals where if you don't hit that goal, you're going to endure some type of pain. And so I've kind of used that to hit my goals a little bit better. We'll talk about that in a different video on how I hit goals. It's an interesting story. But the book that really, I would say, has had the greatest influence on my life is The 4-Hour Workweek. And maybe you've heard other people talking about this, but I've read this book so many times. I read it first in maybe 2009, 2010, and it's really not even for the business ideas in the book. Obviously, it's called The 4-Hour Workweek, so it almost sounds a little scammy, and you think 4 hours a week, that just sounds too good to be true. And for some people, it is too good to be true. They're not gonna actually use the tactics that are given in the book. But I wanna just say that it's not really necessarily just a business book, and actually the things that I got out of it most were probably the ideas of becoming more efficient in life. So productivity is absolutely the key to success in many cases. You look at people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and, well, Steve Jobs or Warren Buffett, and everybody who had wild success from a business standpoint, they all had the same time in the day that you and I have. We all have 24 hours in a day. So how were they able to do it? It's by optimizing your day. One of those things is just by using some block scheduling, by not checking your email 30 times a day, not looking at your phone 100 times a day, but rather blocking it out so that maybe you're only looking at your phone 2 to 3 times per day. You're only checking your email once or twice per day, and it's going to just create a much more efficient life. That's what I got out of that book that really did change the way that I kind of approach tasks in my life. So those are the books that I think were just totally impactful in my life. There's so many. Once again, look, guys, leave your favorites down in the comment section below. I'm always looking for new books, and I'm sure other people are looking for new books as well. And I'm sorry if these were a little bit too much of like informational books. I really like books that are very practical. I'm not really big into fiction anymore these days. I used to read fiction books a lot, but I kind of got away from those into more nonfiction and getting into the ones that are a little bit more helpful and practical for me. That's just my opinion. So thanks for watching the video. Appreciate all the support. The channel's been growing very fast. I love it. So thanks, and I'll see everybody in the next video.